Hello everyone. I'm going to read a prose poem from my book, Vancouver for Beginners, that came out this fall. And thanks to Book Hug, my publisher, for asking me to share a poem during this odd time of Poetry Month during the pandemic. I hope everyone is staying safe inside, and thank you for listening. This poem is called Two. Oh. That's really awkward to try to hold a book up that way. Okay. 2. A developer built 2 buildings side by side near Hornby and Helmkin Street, one to house the dead and one the living. A crew nailed clapboard over the front of the house of the dead, sold apartments for $1.7 million apiece. In the house of the living. Problems arose when the living and the dead began to wave at each other from the side windows, throw messages carried on the breeze, and communicate through the pipes that provided the 2 houses with water from the reservoir on the mountains. The house of the dead hosted all-night parties, had a guy who could get you anything you wanted, and the oldest functioning pop machine in downtown Vancouver. $1 a can. The house of the living had a rooftop whirlpool jacuzzi. The house of the dead was adrift in an ocean of rumors since 2 guys were found on the roof chained to a pipe. The story goes that they couldn't cover the rent. But many people crashed with friends in the house of the dead. The landlord, a guy obsessed with collecting aquariums, turned a blind eye. In both buildings, people crawled into their beds in exactly the same way. No guest policy in the house of the dead. People circulated in the hallways for months, eating cheese sandwiches on the fire escapes to feel the sun drinking from the cold, priceless rain. The developer hired a consultant to build a bridge between the buildings and charged a fee for inhabitants of the house of the living to visit the house of the dead. The house of the living was made of steel and glass, and its inhabitants had forgotten how to see in the dark. The living were blunderers. The twin buildings spun in the faint glow of a spectral sunset. This Vancouver opened its prospector's ocean-sized eyes. The living went back across the bridge when they'd had enough of suffering. Nothing to see over there. The house of the dead was then condemned and scheduled for redevelopment in 2021. The public was welcomed to attend a community consultation session, but the dead were not invited. The development notice was posted and the dead decorated with the names of their friends. An artist with a grant hung a hammock between the 2 buildings. He lived in the hammock for a month and live-streamed from it. His piece was a reflection on the Vancouver housing crisis. One night, a windstorm blew him down and he moved into the house of the dead. For 2 weeks afterwards, Vancouver projected the footage from his live stream onto the facades of the house of the living. People watching the display forgot the house of the dead had been condemned, forgot about the community consultation session, and so the building continued as it always had been. They took better care of their home this time, came and went mostly at night, didn't bug the lawyers going up and down Hornby Street between the subterranean parkades and the courts. Everybody knew the house of the dead was there, but it was no longer a controversy. The dead's living twins in the neighboring building never thought about them anymore. In this Vancouver, people could get used to anything. The living and the dead didn't make eye contact and used separate entrances because otherwise time might get confused. Buildings might shuffle a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, and switch positions. The apartments in the house of the living were put up for sale and changed hands regularly. But in the house of the dead, there were renters and squatters and the occasional translucent teenage prophet. That was the way of the city, Vancouver, spreading in all directions. Thanks for listening.